The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I know not all of you are going to be listening to this bad boy on Labor Day, but I reckon some of you will be, and for those that tune in maybe late on Labor Day or first thing Tuesday morning, we wanted to have this pod ready to go for you anyway. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, everyone. I am Dan Besbris. Today will be the thrilling, or not so thrilling, conclusion to our exploration of the season win totals. It's a little bit of a sports betting primer over the last couple of weeks here on the podcast. We've done it 5 or 6 teams at a time. It'll end up being, I think, about a 6-show span over a few weeks. And I've tried to consolidate these shows to ones where I didn't have a guest or a co-host. And that way, you know what? If you're stuck with Dan, you're stuck with Dan talking about sports betting and that. You know what? That's not bad. First things first, want to quickly mention once again a happy new week to everyone here on Fantasy NBA Today. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Dan Besbris, DanBesbris. I was doing the military spelling last year. I had a lot of people asking if I was somehow involved in the military. I'm not. I wouldn't last a day. But I do think that it's the most efficient way to spell things over phone lines, or in this case, a podcast. So I got really tired of doing the B as in boy, E, S as in Sam thing 100 million times. So I just learned 5 different military letters, basically. Bravo, Echo, Sierra, Bravo, Romeo, India, Sierra. There's my last name. So if you can find me, you can follow me. That's the old adage. At Hoopball Fantasy, at Hoopball Tweets are, of course, the Twitter handles of our benevolent overlords at hoop-ball.com, where the draft guide continues to sell very well. So thank you to everybody that has purchased the draft guide in its first week of existence here in the 2018-2019 NBA campaign. We were among the first, I think, out there across the internet landscape, which is pretty cool. Ton of work being put into that draft guide every day. We didn't want to release it until it was good enough to be released, and it's still going to be getting new large sections added over the next 5 or 6 weeks leading up to opening day. Here's my thing. First of all, I think they just added a DFS section guide to it as well. You've heard me talk about this on the podcast before. I'm going to talk about it again. And that is average draft position. We did a little exploration of it on Thursday of last week's show. Myself, Neil Rochlani, we went through the very first ADPs on Yahoo, which are, of course, skewed by Yahoo's pre-rank system, but it does give us a good starting point. And for me, this is what I use. I've got my... So, okay, let me back up even a little bit farther. We're going to talk a little bit about ADP here for maybe the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then we're going to get into the sports betting stuff. But I think it's important to know that there is sort of like fantasy basketball handicapping for dummies. And I believe this is the single biggest and most useful tool that you can use. And that is ADP tracking. There will be a section in the Hoopball Draft Guide put out by the great Mike Passador, the winner of 30 Deep in his freshman campaign. First year in with the big dogs, and he topples them all, myself included. Not a big dog, but I got toppled. Aaron Brewski included. So he got us. Eric Ong included. All of us here at Hoopball bowing before the great Mike Passador. He puts out the ADP tracker. I think it's a weekly article. I don't know exactly when it starts, but it'll be soon. That just keeps an eye on where guys' ADPs are shifting. Is it going up? Is it going down? Why? We can dig into that a little bit in those articles. We can dig into that a little bit. I'm not going to rehash it for you here because that's a paid service. So I'm not just going to bring it over. But it is, in my opinion, if you take fantasy basketball players and you don't even really need to have them categorized in a 1 to 150 ranking, because once you get through the top 30 or 40 guys, you get into a big clump of dudes that all have pretty darn similar values. What separates them is not necessarily the 55th guy from the 59th guy, because your team would perform basically the same, regardless of which of those two dudes you had. The question is where you drafted them. If you draft the guy who ends the season ranked number 59 at 125, and if you get the guy who ends the season number 55 at number 55, the guy who ended 59 probably helped your team more because you didn't have to use a 4th or 5th round pick on it. I guess that'd be a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick. Whatever. You get it. League size dependent. So it all comes down to value. And the way to know value, the way to get value, is to understand where guys are being drafted and whether or not you believe that they are being underdrafted or overdrafted. And if you can make a decision, underdrafted, overdrafted, or right on the money, for everyone inside the top 125, you can win your league. You don't even have to put names on those dudes. Just go through the list. 1 to 125. The ADP list, 1 to 125, and say overdrafted, underdrafted, or properly drafted. And then, as the season approaches, you track to see where those guys are being drafted, and if it's moving earlier or later, and if that helps or hurts your cause. And by the way, if someone's ADP moves by 1 slot really late in the fantasy season, that actually means they're probably getting drafted more like 5 to 10 slots earlier because, again, it's average. So all of the drafts that are happening right now are still factored. It's like a baseball player's batting average or an NBA player's field goal percentage. What they do in November for NBA or April for baseball matters in August for baseball or March for basketball. Right? You could probably, it's a lot easier. You go and you look up, okay, pick your favorite basketball player, whoever the heck it might be. Let's say you're a massive, it doesn't matter. Let's say you're a massive Minnesota Timberwolves fan. So your favorite basketball player is Karl Anthony Towns. And let's say in November, he shoots 44%. By the way, this hypothetical example probably is not going to happen. And in April, he shoots... in December, he shoots 45%, and in January, he shoots 46%, and February, 44% again, and then March, 53%. Doesn't have to be Karl Anthony Towns. It doesn't matter. We're just creating a scenario here. That dude was sitting somewhere in the 44 to 45% range. When he shoots 53% for a month, that doesn't mean that he's now a 53% shooter. It means that he's on the season more like a 46 or 47% shooter. So his average moved up, but it's not where he's actually been performing. And that's the same thing you have to remember with ADP. If you see someone's ADP go from 115 to 110, that doesn't mean they're actually getting drafted at 110. It means that they're getting drafted so early that it's dragging the whole average forward 5 slots. So it probably means they're going more like 90. This is what we saw with guys like Aaron Gordon last year. They had an ADP in August. Well, now it's September, but when Yahoo opened in August of last year, Aaron Gordon had an ADP of like 95. And then by the beginning of October, his ADP was like 78, which means that there were all those 95s early on, and then later on, there were probably some 40s and 50s, and that's what was pushing it up as fast as it was going. So he was actually going in the 40s and 50s, not the 70s. It was understanding how that movement translated to where he was actually going to be. ADPs, man, learn it. Learn it. Learn how to analyze it and learn it, and that's you can dominate your league. That's it. That's all you need. Okay, let's talk a little sports betting. We only have a handful of teams to go. We did the Portland Trail Blazers just to close out a show last week for the hell of it. So, today, we will get through the Sacramento Kings, the San Antonio Spurs, the Toronto Raptors, the Utah Jazz, and the Washington Wizards. I actually don't think this should be a particularly long show either, and I say that because I hate the Sacramento Kings. I hate their team. I hate talking about the Sacramento Kings. They didn't really get any better. You know, they got a rookie that could be okay. Fine. What else you got? The Sacramento Kings number, by the way, is 25.5. It is lower. They won 27 games last year. They traded away Garrett Temple. They traded away a handful of older guys at the trade deadline last year or just let them go. So they are a super young team, and I have not seen enough to expect them to be very good. I will say I have no feel for this team. None whatsoever. So whatever I'm about to say about them, you could probably just simply ignore it. And in fact, last year, we just went with whatever Brewski said. That was my write-up on the Kings' season win total wager. I had no feel for this team. I still don't. Here's the thing. It's really hard to lose enough games where your win total is less than 26. It's really hard. With just a couple of teams that did it last year. The Kings could be that bad this year. They play in the Western Conference. So 52 of their 82 games are going to be against pretty brutal competition. You know, there will be a handful of games in there against a team like Phoenix. Dallas probably not going to be that great. Memphis better, but probably not outstanding. But I still feel that all of those teams are better than Sacramento. I think even Phoenix is better than Sacramento this year. Brought in a couple of veterans, one of whom I would argue is probably going to help them. One of them, tough to say, but, you know, they got out from dealing with Marquise Chris. So how do you look at a team with the second lowest win total on the board and still have a slight lean to the under? I do. That's the thing. They've got a coach who doesn't like to play young guys, but doesn't really have any old guys to play. So he's going to yank people's minutes around. De'Aaron Fox, to me, didn't show enough last year to make me believe that he was ready to lead an NBA team to victories. They have some talent. They have some young guys who can ball a little bit, but you also have to know how to win. And against decent teams that are all going to be, I mean, this Western Conference, there are about 10 teams that all realize right from the very start of the year that they better go. Every loss, soul-crushing. So they're not really going to look past the Kings all that often, I should say. I think that there's a decent chance this team goes into a semi-tank mode. I think they understand they have no shot to progress this year outside of maybe some growth from the young players. So this is a team that should be valuing a pick more than anything else. Here's the problem. They don't have it. They don't have their pick. So this puts me on the fence with Sacramento. I still have a slight lean to the under because I think they're just that bad. But when you don't have a reason to go into full tank mode, you could steal a few at the end of the year. In fact, they'd probably like to win and send a pick that isn't as terrible. Isn't as great. Am I getting this right? Does Boston have their pick? I think it's Boston. I'm just going with Boston because they have everybody's pick. But you guys can correct me if I misfired on where that's actually being sent. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Sacramento because, again, I've got no feel for this team. Normally, I would bet the over for teams that have a mark this low, but they really are terrible. San Antonio Spurs, 43.5. I believe this one is an over. And I also believe that you can get yourself into a spot where you overthink a line a little bit. I believe that this line dropped because teams felt that Kawhi Leonard going away from San Antonio eliminated their opportunity to win a championship. By the way, those people are right. They're not going to win the championship. with the LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan core. But what they are going to do is maximize their guys. They do it every year. They lost Kyle Anderson to Memphis via free agency, but they'll just bring in some other young guy who ends up being solid and better than anybody expected. It happened with Kyle Anderson. It happened with DeJounte Murray. It happened with Kawhi Leonard, if you go back a little bit. They just keep Patty Mills, George Hill. I mean, the list goes on and on about these guys that you just didn't hear about, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, by the way, they're awesome, and they play for the Spurs, and you never heard of them. So they're going to be fine. I like that they got Jakob Poeltl in that trade with Toronto. He's a solid backup. He's going to get minutes at center because he's better at running the floor than their other options. They have Pau Gasol in the middle. LaMarcus Aldridge, still decent defensively if his skills might be waning a tiny bit. DeMar DeRozan, solid basketball player. Rudy Gay now a couple years removed from his massive injury. They won more than this last year, and Kawhi played 9 games. There isn't much of a reason to think that it's all going to come apart. Greg Popovich is still there. They still have a great coaching staff. The guy that wasn't involved with the team is gone, so the bad mojo is sort of out of the way this year. They won't have that stuff hanging over them all season long. I think the progression of guys like DeJounte Murray and Poeltl and the veteran leadership, this is not a team that's going to be trying to lose games. They're going to find ways to win. They're going to be real good defensively. And they're going to win, 45, 46 games like they always do, or more. They don't have the superstar. Yeah, that means they're not going to win a championship. But to me, Spurs are still a playoff team in the West, even in the very difficult West. This is not the time to give up on Pop. Not yet. Yeah, maybe he's starting to get towards the end of his tenure, a team that can't seem to, remember, they're the issues with LaMarcus Aldridge the previous year, so maybe some of that shine is coming off. Manu Ginobili retired. Tony Parker is now a member of the Charlotte Hornets. There's an era that came to a close for San Antonio, and there isn't really a new era that's opening up. It was supposed to be the Kawhi Leonard era, but he's gone. So now they have 2 stars, but not superstars. No superstars on this team. But, here's the thing. I look at this line, and it does jump out to me at how low it is. That it's lower than New Orleans and lower than, well, basically every playoff team in the West except for Portland. But they're going to make it. Spurs are going to make the playoffs. They just do. It's what they do. They're going to find a way to maximize DeMar DeRozan. They've got this weird mid-range bonanza going on out there. Someone's going to have to learn how to shoot. That's the bottom line. But I trust someone will. They always do. Why would be, it's, yes, looking back at our Lakers wager from last week or the week before, I can't remember when we had our Lakers show, I kind of faded LeBron James, and basically anytime anybody ever does that, they end up paying for it. I admit, I had the over for San Antonio last year, and that did not hit, and it didn't hit because Kawhi Leonard didn't play at all. And so now there's been an over-adjustment. They're healthy, at least going into the year. They're healthy. There's no bad media swirling around them. They can sort of go back to what they always do, and let's find a way to win ball games. They beat teams that are better than them. They almost always beat the teams that are worse than them because they out-defend those guys. Losing Kyle Anderson, yeah, that's a little bit of a shot on the defensive side. He was much better defensively than I think people realized for this team. But again, they've got these long dudes. Aldridge is long. DeJounte Murray is super long. Pau Gasol is actually long, if slow. Big and slow. They'll be fine. Rudy Gay is long. Rudy Gay back in his heyday was a big-time steals and blocks guy. I think we all kind of forgot that. He was solid for a wing player. Over. Feel pretty good about it, too. The Toronto Raptors. This is a weird one. We're going to have to spend a minute on this team because I've heard arguments in both directions. And you know what? We might as well just give both of those. Here's the argument for the over. The Raptors line is 54.5. They won 59 games last year. They were the best team in the Eastern Conference. They ran roughshod on everybody, rolling up massive win differentials. There were, I forget the exact number. I think it was like 7 or 8 games in a row where the starters didn't have to play in the fourth quarter. No, it wasn't 8 in a row. It was like 7 out of 8. That was 4 in a row, and then there was one where they had to play, and there were 2 or 3 where they didn't have to play. This team was crazy deep. They're still pretty deep. This is the argument for the over. They're still pretty deep. They replaced DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl with Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, who, by the way, played last year with a torn groin. Ow. I can't help but think of that old Simpsons bit. I mean, this is from, I think we're going back to the 1990s here. You remember the episode where Homer becomes, I believe, he's either a film critic or he votes for the Oscars, and he's tries to vote for a movie of a guy getting hit in the groin with a football in the groin. Then I don't remember the actor at the very end. Someone, you guys can tweet at me because I'm sure one of you remembers what I'm talking about better than I do. But they get the initial movie is just some guy getting hit in the balls with a football, and then they at the end it wins an Oscar with some famous actor playing the part, and he says, "Ow, my groin." And that's all I can think of when I hear about this Danny Green thing. The Spurs doctors whiffing on the Kawhi Leonard stuff, Danny Green with the groin thing. This was clearly a timed media release of Danny Green getting to Toronto saying, "Oh, by the way, Spurs doctors, they missed that I had this torn groin. The Raptors doctors, though, they're great. They've been nothing but awesome. They've diagnosed it. Everything's going to be good. So, Kawhi Leonard, you've got nothing to worry about." Wink, wink, nod, nod. So the Raptors are trying to roll out the red carpet, make Kawhi Leonard feel welcome. There's a chance the little chance, I suppose, that he could stay in Toronto. It's not out of the question, even though it sounds like he does want to go to L.A. He's better than DeMar DeRozan. Is Danny Green better than Jakob Poeltl? In some respects, yes, they're different basketball players. Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan are a little bit more comparable, not in that they're similar in skills, but they are similar in where they stand on a basketball court. They're wing guys. And Kawhi is better. At his best, Kawhi Leonard is a top 5 player in the NBA. He's an MVP candidate, and DeMar DeRozan is not. So, on a team that still has Kyle Lowry, and still has Jonas Valanciunas, and still has Serge Ibaka, doesn't have DeRozan, but now has Kawhi Leonard, added Danny Green, lost Jakob Poeltl, still has Freddie VanVleet, still has OG Anunoby, still has DeLon Wright, still has Pascal Siakam, still, I believe, has Bebe Nogueira, who, shout out to Ralph's Supermarket, running into Bebe there. I think I mentioned that on a podcast last week. Don't know what he was doing. Still don't know what he was doing there. Shopping for groceries, I guess, but I didn't know he lived in West L.A. He played for Toronto. We're not close, by the way. To those of you listening to this podcast across the globe, Toronto and Los Angeles are not close to one another. You guys know that because the rest of the world understands geography. It's those of us here in the States that don't. Sorry. Okay, so they still got all these guys. Lowry's getting older. Ibaka's getting older. Maybe that puts a dent into it, but they still got almost all of the same pieces outside of the Kawhi for DeRozan swap. So 59 wins last year. Why would the line only be 54.5 this season? I don't understand. It seems so simple. And the East, hot garbage. Now here's the argument for the under. When you throw a brand new superstar into a team that had basically oiled up all the gears, the cogs were just humming, man, there's an adjustment period, even if he's one of the best in the game. Kawhi Leonard has not really played competitive basketball in almost 2 years by the time this season starts. It's been a long time. Year and a half, probably. More an accurate description. Discounting the 9 games. How is he going to do? Is there going to be a learning curve? Are we going to see a beginning of the season like we saw with the Big Three in Miami, where a team goes something like 9-9 or 10-10 their first 20 games as they start to feel things out? And if you're expecting a team to win 55 games, that means they can only lose 27. And if you lose 10 of those in the first month and a half, that doesn't leave you a whole lot of wiggle room. Reason number 2. Kyle Lowry finally didn't get hurt last year. Is that sustainable? This is a guy that we've seen before. He throws his whole body into every play and tends to miss a little bit of time. Not always gargantuan stretches. You only missed the last 5 games of the year 3 seasons back. It felt like worse than that because, it killed you if you were in your head-to-head playoffs, and it killed him going into the real playoffs. Year before that, he missed 12 games. 2 years back, he missed 22. This year, he played in 78 out of 82 games. That's a big deal. He's a motor on that team. He's the motor. Serge Ibaka seems to be getting worse on a weekly basis. So what can they really expect out of him? I'm hearing a lot of buzz about OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. I'll believe it when I see it. I know that they can D up a little bit, and that's good, but I do feel like each of them has a long way to go on the offensive end. So far to go on the offensive end. Everybody wants to anoint them like magical game changers already, and maybe they will be. You know what? I'm not saying they won't, but I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen them do anything on the offensive side yet. So if Serge gets worse, and if Lowry gets hurt, and if the rest of these guys don't take a step forward, and if Kawhi Leonard maybe isn't 100% and takes time to get used to his teammates and decides halfway through the year that he's really not all that married to Toronto and kind of mails it in a little bit, maybe until the playoffs, there's a very real opportunity here for regression in the negative direction this time. We've talked about it with Indiana. We've talked about it with Philadelphia. When teams make big leaps forward, which it seemed like Toronto did this season, there is a propensity to fall back the following season. And it's that math. And you know me, I'm not always a numbers guy. I like to really watch a lot of tape and see how teams perform. But new coaching staff, by the way, also a factor in this. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be good or bad, but it does create a certain extra kind of click of discomfort and discord as everybody starts to get used to one another. They learn different ways to play. There's going to be a lot of change, and delta is not necessarily a good thing in the NBA. It might be by the end of the year for this team. It should be, I hope, if everybody's healthy and Kawhi's playing hard. But boy, it makes beginnings of seasons tough. And so for that reason, I do have a slight lean to the under on Toronto Raptors. I know that sounds crazy for a team as good as they were, just blowout after blowout after blowout. I just don't think it's going to be that simple. Teams are going to be a bit more ready. They are not going to be playing the same brand of basketball, and it's going to be a little bit bumpier. At least maybe until the new year. The Utah Jazz, 48.5. I love the Jazz. I really do. I know this number is super high, but I still think they handle it. The Utah Jazz were an interesting case study because they weren't necessarily a team that made a unexpectedly large leap forward this season. They were just really freaking good when healthy. When the Utah Jazz were healthy, they ate teams alive. Some nights, they did a few extra things on the offensive side, but most nights, it was Rudy Gobert. And that's what this wager comes down to. If Rudy Gobert doesn't miss 2.5 months this last season, the Jazz would have been 50 wins easy. He's their anchor. Everything they do on defense is built around having him back there protecting the rim. He also, by the way, does more on the offensive side than people give him credit for. But Ricky Rubio setting things up. Joe Ingles, fantastic. Donovan Mitchell, budding superstar. They overpaid to bring Derek Favors back. But they have consistency. And that's a big deal in the NBA. This Utah Jazz team, I mean, they were on pace to win if Rudy Gobert was around the whole year, they were on pace to win 55 or 60 games, which I realize that's kind of a shooting the moon type of thing. Truth be told, I was hoping this number would be more like 46.5, and then I would have poured my life savings into the over. At 48.5, it's a tough one to get to, but I think they do just get there. Here's the reason that I believe that there isn't going to be this kind of regression like we saw with a team like Toronto, or more appropriately, I think, a team like Indiana. Indiana came out of nowhere. Nobody saw them coming. They redefined how they played on offense, and they just totally caught people with their pants down. Oladipo was brilliant. Darren Collison was brilliant. Thad Young in that team was brilliant. Even Bojan Bogdanovic had a great year. They just steamrolled teams, ran them right out of the gym. What the Jazz do didn't surprise anybody. They didn't reinvent the wheel. They're just good as hell, fundamentally, and they have the tools on the offensive side to do enough to win. I need Ricky Rubio and I need Rudy Gobert to both play a decent number of games this year, and if they do, I think they get to 50 wins. I think there are going to be a handful of teams at the top of the West that just crush teams below them, and I believe the Utah Jazz are one of those teams. It's a hard one, though. This is a hard sell. 48.5 is a really big number, so I understand this is not the type of number where you pour your life savings into it. It's too hard. Too many things can go wrong that can knock you off of a number like 49. We got to get to 49, guys. That's huge. You can't afford to blow any games, any easy ones, especially not. Again, I know you play most of the teams in the Western Conference 4 times, but you play the teams in your division 4 times. And for Utah, that division is curtains, man. Denver, Portland, Minnesota, Oklahoma City. Good Lord. That is 16 slogs. But they've got the altitude, so they got the home court stuff going on for Utah. They know that they can use that to their advantage. Man, you make teams work for 3 quarters when they're sucking wind like that, and you can steal a few. But defense also travels, that old adage. It's still true, man. If you can play defense, you can win road games. I guess the other adage would be if you have LeBron James, you can sometimes win road games. Or if you're as good as the Warriors, you can win road games too. But defense, man, that does the trick. And with Utah, they have it if they're healthy. Got to stay healthy. Hoping they do. I'm hoping they do. I think the Jazz, they have a very real shot to be the number 2 seed in the West this year. Warriors number 1. You're going to see the Rockets, the Jazz, and the Thunder are all going to be duking it out for the 2 through 4 spots. Then I think you're going to see the Lakers probably sitting in that 5 hole. They might be in a weird 2-game pocket, where then you've got teams like Denver, New Orleans. I guess they're all in that wheelhouse. They'll be fighting it out with the Lakers for 5, 6, and 7. And then you probably got Minnesota and San Antonio fighting for 8. Good Lord, the Western Conference. My God. Abandoned ship. Somebody moved to the East. It's crazy. Last team on the docket, and then we'll wrap up sports betting for a little bit on the podcast, at least till we get closer to opening day. We got a lot of fantasy things we got to go over soon. Washington Wizards, 44.5. Guys, you know me. We've been down this road before. So you don't need me to take 6 minutes to say one sentence. You remember that old website, isabevigodadead.com? No, it's isabevigodaalive.com. No, I had it right. Okay. isavebogota.dead.com. It was a horrible website, but at least the answer was no for a really long time. He did pass away 2 years ago, so the website is now much sadder than it used to be. But the website that I would like to put up is Dwight Howard a member of your team.com? And the answer right now is, if you're the Washington Wizards, yes. And that's not a good thing. Dwight Howard, as we've said many times on this podcast, is a disaster. If you're building a fantasy team and you're in anything other than a punt format, which you guys know I don't much care for punt formats to begin with, and he is a locker room disaster, and he is an on-court disaster. He is a lane clogger that keeps saying that he wants to play for 8 more years and he's going to change his game to be more relevant in the modern NBA. Dwight, have you really surrounded yourself with such a group of people that no one will sit you down and say, Mr. Howard, if you want to be a helpful teammate, set a pick and roll to the rim. You're an athletic freak. Your dunk contest dunks still make me laugh. A decade later, I loved the smiling Dwight sticker dunk. I loved the Superman dunk. He's a showman, but he's a dummy. He won't do the things that his teammates need him to do. It goes really back to his Laker days. The Lakers had this incredible slew of talent, and all he had to do was go set a high pick for Steve Nash, who could either hit him rolling to the rim for an easy dunk. You got Kobe on that team. The options were limitless. Powell was somewhere. Heaven knows. To Houston, to Atlanta, to Charlotte. It's all the same stinking story. Dwight's got to have a few touches in the post every game. Those are wasted touches. Wasted touches. Get your butt out to the perimeter, set a screen, and roll. We don't want you shooting dump shots. We want you. You're a giant human being with unbelievable athletic ability. And a wide-winning grin that drives everybody totally bonkers. But forget all that stuff. Just run, pick, and roll. But he's not going to do it. He's never done it before. There's no reason to believe he will do it now. John Wall thinks he's happy to have Marcin Gortat out of town, but it's not going to get any better. Dwight is going to kill the fantasy value for anybody that relied on rebounds on that team. So don't look to Markieff Morris for value and expect Otto Porter's value to take a hit. I think Bradley Beal probably slips through here. He should still see a decent number of shots, and he can be fairly ball dominant at times. It's one of this team's biggest issues is an inability to actually move the basketball beyond one pass and shoot. Gee, where have we heard that? Oh, Oklahoma City. Interesting. I wonder if there's any coaching correlation. Oh, shoot. And then you throw Dwight into the mix. There is just no prayer that this team comes out of this season without some sort of massive issues. John Wall seemed like he's taken a step back. I don't know if it was playing hurt or if it's just that his game has become inefficient. And they needed him, by the way, in the postseason because he was the only guy going out there and creating his own shot. But during the regular season, we saw how well they played when Wall was out, and it was because there was a team effort taking place. It wasn't because Thomas Satoransky is better than John Wall. It's because he got out of the way every once in a while. Got out of the way. Let Otto Porter do a few things. Let Markieff Morris do a few things. You knew Bradley Beal was going to do plenty. And now you got to worry about a team that needs easier looks, right? With John Wall, his jump shot is horrible. That's why he has such a terrible shooting percentage, and now suddenly the lane's going to be clogged up for him. Bradley Beal, not going to be able to get to the bucket. Luckily, he does have a buttery jumper. Otto Porter also has a nice jumper as well. But the problem is, guys are just going to be spaced more poorly. Jumpers are going to be less open. The lane is going to be less open. Dwight is going to demand the basketball more than he deserves. Somebody's going to end up fighting with somebody else, and the Wizards are not going to get better. And this number is an indication that people believe they will improve. 44.5. It's right around where they were. I don't think that they necessarily underperformed last year. I think people might believe they should have had more wins because John Wall missed a couple months in the middle of the year, but that was when they won the games. Those are the months where the Wizards actually racked up some victories. They were on pace to be a really bad team if everyone stayed healthy all year. So health be damned on this club. They're a disaster waiting to happen. Give me the under. Give me plenty of it, by the way. You know me. I love the Hornets this year. I hate the Wizards, and it all comes down to one stinking thing. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on the rest of the week here on Fantasy NBA Today. We'll, of course, be the Dan Besbris, Adrian Benjamin's duo on the Tuesday show, talking more Dynasty stuff. Things are getting heated in Hoop Ball Dynasty League 2. We'll talk more strategy with Adrian about that. Wednesday, would it be me? Solo. Opportunity to talk about something besides sports betting. You'll just have to stay tuned, see what that's going to be about. Neil and I will continue our discussion on Thursday about preparing for draft stuff. And, of course, Adrian and Neil, they broke down the first Hoop Ball mock draft on Friday's show last week. You should go back and listen to that. I'm sure they'll have additional thoughts this coming Friday. Things heating up, folks. We're in September. Happy September, by the way. Welcome to the month. The penultimate month, actually the last month we have to deal with before the month where NBA begins. I was going to say the penultimate month, but, you know, that would imply that we'd have to wait through an entire other month. We don't. We're into the last NBA-less month, and actually I believe training camp does start at some point later on this one. By the way, much like Summer League, please don't buy the hype of training camp. And, of course, on tomorrow's show with Adrian, we will perform our weekly countdown. How many weeks for opening night? So excited. So excited. There's something about Yahoo opening that really made it all feel very real. Thanks for listening, everybody. This was the wrap-up here of your season-long win totals. I should say a month-long season win totals segment on Fantasy NBA Today. We'll take a little respite here from sports betting. Looking forward, by the way, to getting Zach Feldman back on the podcast. Sounded like the response to Talking Analytics a little bit was a positive one. So we'll dig into that a little bit more in the coming weeks as well as his articles come out over at hoop-ball.com. Once again, go buy the draft guide. You will be happy you did. It is $13.99 right now. $14. If your league entry fee is significantly more than that, you should pay $14 extra and ensure that you win money in your fantasy league. Hoopball, unbelievable track record, and Brewski's getting set to do it again. Brewski 150, by the way, as part of that draft guide. That's been a big question. Do you get the B150? Yes, you do on October 1st. That's when that's getting released. A little less than a month from today. B150 in the draft guide. So if you buy the draft guide on October 1, it'll be added to it, and you can get that as part of the deal as well. Once again, I'm Dan Besbris. Thanks for listening here, spending your Labor Day or part of it with us here at Fantasy NBA Today. Looking forward to getting right back at it tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.